The goal of this video is to share with you 5 different techniques on how to activate a hinge release, with the goal being for you to try each method to determine what fits you best so that you can be the best bow hunter and the best archer that you strive to be. Now, if you're already a proficient hinge shooter, this video may not be for you. But if you're still learning and you want to learn different methods on how to fire the hinge release, then this video is definitely for you. Now, I also want to be clear that all of these methods can be used with or without the click. I do personally prefer the click, but you can definitely shoot it without as well. Ultimately, it is the rotation of the release that causes a hinge release to fire, but there are multiple different ways to achieve this rotation. And you might personally find that there are certain ways that are more consistent for you, and if it is more consistent and more comfortable for you, you're gonna find yourself being a more accurate shooter, and you're gonna be a lot more confident in this release and the execution method that you choose to utilize. The first method I'm gonna share with you is one of the methods I find myself using the most. It is the hand stretch and pull method. Now, it's important that you have your hinge release not set too hot, but also not too cold. I like to have it somewhere in between so I can have more even pressure across all of my fingers on the release. That gives you so much more control with this method, and I'll explain why. This method consists of having firm pressure with your hand, almost in the motion of your hand making a fist. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to basically set our fingers in the release, have a firm J hook on the release. We're going to draw back in position, but our hand is almost going to be balled up. Now, it's not going to be white knuckling the release like this, but it's also not going to be laid flat like this either. We want to have a little bit of built up tension in this hand for this method to work. When you come to full draw, your fingers are remaining very firm around the release, and you've got that built up tension in your hand. What's happening is your fingers are still staying firm, but your hand is slowly stretching, and as your hand stretches, it is causing rotation in the release. So when I'm firm like this, and I stretch my hand, got to the click, and I'm just pulling through and continuing to stretch until that hand basically rotates the release and fires. It's key to note when using this method that you're not just stretching your hand to fire this release. You've also got to keep that tension against your back wall. And what I find is as I slowly stretch my hand, I'm also slowly building pressure, almost like I would shoot a resistance release. So I kind of combine the stretch of the hand that's causing that rotation with a slow continuous pull or slow continuous back pressure squeeze, just to keep that tension against the back wall so I'm not coming up out of my valley. When you utilize this method, you should feel extremely solid and extremely firm with this release. You should feel very, very steady at full draw, but it's very important when you are stretching your hand, you are not relaxing your fingers, you are not sliding your fingers on the release. It is simply a hand stretch. These fingers stay hooked around the release, they stay firm, and it's just a slow stretch on the release. Now, you'll have to experiment with how you have your release set to utilize this method, but somewhere where you can feel even pressure on all 3 or 4 fingers when utilizing this method on the release. It's important to have even pressure with this so that you can evenly stretch out your hand to get this to work the best for you. So let me try to talk you through as I do this method of executing. When I hook the release on the string, I set all my fingers in the appropriate position. I wrap my thumb around the safety. Most of the pressure is on my index and thumb to draw, but I'm hooking my fingers and I'm making a slight fist. Again, not white knuckling, not super tight, but not super stretched out and relaxed either. I want a slight fist to kind of hold up that tension. Okay, my fingers are set. I've got the slight fist. I raise my bow up, I draw back, come into anchor. As I come into anchor, like this, I aim, pick a spot, and I slowly squeeze to the click, squeeze my hand. I get to the click, and now I'm slowly pulling, slowly stretching my hand until it fires. This method is great to utilize under pressure. I personally find it easier, instead of building pressure to execute a release under pressure and under all that adrenaline, to slowly release pressure and stretch that hand. I find it more controllable, and it really slows you down for those shots in those moments. Note that this isn't a quick movement when you're using this method and executing with this release this way. It is a slow, steady, continuous movement that you don't see, but you can feel it when you're shooting. The next method I'm going to share with you is a relaxation technique that a lot of people find very consistent results in, and it has to do with slowly relaxing your index finger to cause the rotation in the release. Your index finger and your thumb hold the safety to when you're shooting a hinge release, and this method utilizes your index finger almost like a trigger to cause that rotation to fire the release. Now this method is more commonly shot with the release set more hot or more fast, where there's more pressure held in your index finger of the release, because it's easier to relax when you're under more tension than when you're spread out and you have more even pressure across all of your fingers. What you will do as you draw, come to anchor, and aim is you will slowly relax your index finger to the click and then continue to relax your index finger until it fires. It's important that you keep these outside fingers firm on the release. As you relax your index finger, those outside fingers have to catch that pressure to actually cause that rotation in the release. It's also very important that you must keep that pressure against your back wall, again, with any relaxation technique in order to cause that rotation to fire the release. It's very common for people to be too relaxed and actually come out of their valley, come off of their back wall, and result in inconsistencies with their shot. Please note that when using this method, your index finger is not sliding off of the release. You are just relaxing that index finger to cause that rotation. This is a slow, steady movement, and you should not be able to see this movement when you're shooting, but you should be able to feel it. It's important that you're not doing it quickly like you would if you are forcing a shot on a trigger release. You have to do this slow to do it properly. The third method I'm going to share with you is almost the exact opposite of the second method I just shared with you. This consists of actually keeping pressure on those outside fingers and building pressure with those outside fingers to cause that rotation to fire. Now this works very, very good if you're used to shooting a resistance release, because it is very well paired with building pressure on those outside fingers as you build pressure against the back wall with your shot. Now as you do this, your focus is on not squeezing your fingers. Your focus is on those outside fingers, which is this middle finger and ring finger, building the pressure against that outside part of the handle as I pull through the shot, which is causing that rotation and causing the release to fire. Now to use this method, we hook in our release, we set our fingers just normally in the release in the normal position, wrap our thumb on the safety, majority of the pressure is on the index finger and thumb, raise the bow, drop back. Now as I come into anchor, what I do is I slowly squeeze those outside fingers to the click, and then I'm slowly building pressure, pulling with those outside fingers until the release fires. So I'm not squeezing those fingers, I just have them firm. As I build that pressure, it is causing pressure on the outside of the handle, which causes the rotation and causes the release to fire. Now this method is very different than the first two methods I shared with you, but it works best if you are used to shooting a resistance release. If not, no worries, keep trying all of these methods. We've got a few more to share with you. You've got to try them all to see what works best for you. The fourth method is called the scissor method. It is a combination of two of the other methods that we discussed, but it is a combination of relaxing the index finger and using those outside fingers to build pressure to cause that rotation of the release to fire. You don't necessarily build back tension with this method, you just keep constant pressure against your back wall and manipulate your fingers to cause that rotation to occur. This is most commonly used by many professional and tournament archers, as there is less input put into the release as you are not building the pressure against your back wall, but it can be a little bit more difficult to control since there is less movement actually put into the release and into the muscles used to execute the shot. This is one of my favorite methods to use if I'm shooting a hinge without the click, as I can more easily feel the release rotating in my hand until it fires. But of course, you can use this method with the click as well. The fifth and last method I'm going to show you is opposite of the second, similar to the third, but different in how you activate it and how you think about activating it. This method also doesn't utilize an increase in back tension, as you will also keep the same amount of tension against your back wall throughout the entire shot. This method consists of a slow, steady squeeze on those outside fingers, that middle and ring finger, to get to the click and squeeze through the shot. Now, note that this is completely different than the third method, which is focusing on those outside fingers to build pressure and pull through your shot, because all you're doing is keeping the same amount of pressure against your back wall, but you are slowly actually squeezing and rotating those fingers in your hand to manipulate the release to cause the rotation, to cause it to fire. This method is very accurate if you can control it, because it's a very simple movement. This makes the hinge function more like a trigger release, but of course we don't want to force the shot. We can just focus on the slow, steady movement until the release rotates enough to fire, which is key for every method. It's important when utilizing this method to actually be able to feel the rotation in the release. Now, It's more common that this type of execution method is done with a 4-finger release, as you can feel a lot more movement when using that pinky or last finger on your hand, because that release moves a lot more as you're going through the execution process to execute the release. In all reality, with every method, there is a transfer of pressure between the fingers that cause the rotation to occur. But what is important is your mindset and what you're focusing on when you're actually going through the process to execute the release. When you're focusing on one specific movement, it makes it easier to be more consistent, easier to repeat. When it is easier to be more consistent and easier to repeat, you find yourself being more accurate. And as archers and bow hunters, that is always our goal. Try these methods out. Comment below which method you like best. Please let us know if you found this video helpful. We always appreciate the feedback. Get out, shoot your bow. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.